So one of the challenges of taking a trail bike to the bike park is getting it to stop. Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. As always, my name is Todd, and I'm an old-ass mountain biker living here in Massachusetts. And the Fezzari Cascade Peak, it's a trail bike. It came with 4-pot brakes, which was really nice, but it's only got a 180mm rotor in the front and a 160mm rotor in the back, and that's about to change. We have SRAM's new HS2 Rotors, 200mm in the front, 180 in the rear. One of the big advantages of using this rotor is it's 2mm thick as opposed to the traditional 1.8. It's supposed to give you an additional 30% stopping power. In addition to that, the rotors also have some heat dissipating paint. So it's supposed to do a better job of reducing the overall heat on the brakes themselves. So let's go ahead and get these wheels off and we'll show you how to swap out the rotors. Really quick before we get started on the upgrade, I wanted to point out a new Allen key and Torx wrench set that I picked up. So last week, if you saw episode 1, I was using a pretty flimsy Allen key set. It was not very efficient when working on the bike. So I picked this up off of Amazon. It's only $28. I don't expect it to be park tool quality, but I do expect them to work. For today's service, we will need the T25 to remove these bolts. And then we'll be able to put the new rotors on. So let's get to it. When putting the new rotor on, there's a couple of things to think about. When you look at the rotor itself, on one side, there is some printing on it. We want this facing out, as well as take a look, and you'll notice it says to tighten it to 6.2 Newton meters. As always, it's a good idea to have some kind of torque wrench in order to set it correctly. We're going to start all the bolts by hand, and then we'll come back behind afterwards and snug them up. And just in case I forgot to mention it earlier, make sure you're using some kind of thread locker whenever you're reinstalling these bolts. And for those of you wondering whether or not it really pays to enlarge your rotors, let's just take a look at how much larger it is. Almost the entire braking surface larger. So that's really nice. All right, let's get the front wheel on. Putting the larger rotors on the wheels is only half the job. We now have to make sure that our calipers align with the new rotors. The Cascade Peak comes with DVO Diamond D1 forks. They are post mount for 160mm rotors. Because I had 180mm rotors in the front already, you can see there is a 20mm adapter already on. In order to have it work with the new 200mm rotor, I will be using this 40mm adapter, and it will not only hold the caliper further away from the fork, but it will also shift it out or up slightly. So let's go ahead and take the old one off and get this on and see what that looks like. And then we'll set this aside to use for the back. When installing the adapter on your front forks, what we're going to do is make sure this is pointing up, and it will get attached to your forks like this, and then the calipers will be attached to it. As always, use a torque wrench and the recommended setting is 11.5 Newton meter. And the same holds true when it comes time to attach the caliper to the adapter. We're going to use 11.5 Newton meters. When installing the caliper, don't make it too tight yet, because we still have to center the caliper with the rotor, and we want to make sure we have a little bit of play to allow that to happen. When installing the rear caliper adapter, you'll notice the arrow. This time we want the arrow pointing towards the front of the bike. Now to put the tires back on and center the rotors in the calipers. To center the calipers, you will apply the rear brake so that the pads have centered around the rotor. And then we will start to snug these down and come back afterwards with the torque wrench. That just about wraps up the rotor upgrade. I did have a little bit of a challenge in the fact that I have either sticky pistons or a lazy seal, depending on what video you watch. I'll put a link in the description below, one of the videos that I watched in order to figure out how to do it. And it took me a couple of days to get the pistons to move freely. The area I was working in was pretty small. I didn't record any of that. But it did take me a couple of days before I was able to actually get the rotor to spin inside the caliper without rubbing against the brake pad, and obviously they retract enough that you're able to rinse and repeat. So I'm going to consider this a success. Hopefully in the next week or so, I'm out on the trails giving all of these upgrades a go. In the meanwhile, if you enjoy the content, please do me a favor and consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks, everyone.